Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show, a podcast to help you get an insider's view of the financial world and escape common investment traps. We look at the financial news of the day and help you make sense of it so you can relax about money.
Welcome back to the Investor Coaching Show. Gorgeous Saturday. Great day to be an American. Great day to love golf. And it's a great day to be a confident investor. So what is going on with kind of this gambling? I don't even know what I would call it. Just this wave of gambling everywhere in society. And it starts to spill over into investing because now money is tied to a lot of these things. Ran across an article, I think this was from Bloomberg. Weather prediction markets are booming. Can they improve forecasts? From Kalshi and Polymarket to niche scientific platforms, traders are predicting the weather, and climate experts are debating the results. A few days before Christmas, Howard Quinn was scrutinizing weather forecasts on two laptops at home in Shanghai when he noticed prices of contracts for New York City snowfall creeping higher on the prediction market Kalshi. He checked the Times Square webcam for specks of white. Affirmative. The recent Stanford math graduate and lifelong weather buff had spent about $200 on predictions that total New York City snowfall that month would top various thresholds. For example, more than 2 inches. Now the value of his shares was rising. So when they say this lifelong weather buff had spent $200 on predictions, that means he bet $200 that it was going to snow more than 2 inches in New York City. And now markets are being created for this kind of stuff. There was just one wrinkle. He had to attend a guitar recital, so he closed out the trade, and he made $327. Fine. That was 2024. 2 years later, Quinn, now 24, is still making small bets, quote, just for fun, including on Central Park snowfall during January's megastorm. Here's the interesting thing in the article. What's changed is the sheer number of people placing bets on weather markets and the amount of money flowing through them. So, we've been talking about, I think they even advertised on the station for a while, DraftKings or some of those, the betting platforms on sports and, I'm not a gambler, so, if you're laughing in your car, that's okay. Like 3 parlay, whatever, but now we're betting on weather and actually having a market created for betting on weather. Trading volume for the January snowstorm that we just finished topped $6 million on Kalshi, one of the largest weather contracts ever traded on the rapidly growing platform. Here's where this gets interesting. As these markets grow, weather nerds and climate researchers are debating whether prediction markets can improve forecasts by aggregating knowledge and in turn inform investment and policy, or whether there's simply zero-sum games in which uninformed gamblers make or lose a quick buck. And so they're kind of relying on this concept called the wisdom of crowds. And it's a great book if you're into, frankly, just human behavior or psychology and some of that kind of stuff. The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki is a great book. Surowiecki. James Surowiecki. If you just Google Wisdom of Crowds, you're going to get some other fiction book that's a series of 3. So make sure you put James Surowiecki. It's written in 2004. But here's the basic premise of this, and just as an example, where he got some of these things. Paul talks about this on the show a lot. Francis Galton's ox. In 1906, statistician Francis Galton observed that the median guess of 800 fairgoers regarding an ox's weight was within 1% of the true weight. So he looked at all of the guesses they had and said, okay, what's median answer? The ox actually weighed 1,207 pounds. That was the actual weight. And the median guess was 1,198 pounds. They were only off by 9 pounds. And so there's this assumption that participants bring unique knowledge or perspective to some piece of information and that they're independent of each other. So these 800 people weren't colluding to guess the weight of the ox, just like these people betting on weather aren't necessarily colluding with each other, although we'll get to that. They're starting to see some of these things get monkeyed with in the market, which the regulation is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Decentralization. People are able to draw on local specific knowledge. And one of the other principles for a wise crowd is aggregation. A mechanism exists to turn private judgments into a collective decision. Now, in that regard, both Polymarket and Kalshi serve as that mechanism. They're bringing to bear this consensus of information. But crowd wisdom can fail, if there's a lack of diversity, if it's a very homogenous group, if there's some social pressure to go a certain way, that may, kind of like us having a conflict of interest, selling some product, which we don't do, that says, oh, this has a higher commission than the other product, and so, we'll sell this because we'll make more money. That's why we don't do any of that stuff. But that's what they're talking about is maybe there's some undue influence in having people make this choice in the prediction market and using that to start giving forecasts to corporations because companies do this all the time. They have weather staff, because they're like, okay, this business, are we going to have to ship stuff early because we think there's a blizzard coming in? All of that stuff affects their profitability. But here they're talking about science markets specifically as opposed to like sports or politics. Beyond the open access platforms of Kalshi and Polymarket, scientists are building bespoke trading platforms that they hope will draw out societally useful information. They're basically trying to create ways that we can harness the wisdom of crowds. We create markets not because we think, oh, this is something lots of people will want to bet on, Ralston said. We create a market because there's an end user, like a reinsurance company, that says we would like a better prediction of this. So, everyone is running on predictions all the time. And that's fine if a company wants to forecast their profits. That's why they call it a forecast. You don't know that that's their profit until they actually announce. But, a company is going to predict things. But as an investor, you don't want to be in that business of predicting because things can change quickly. As an example, yesterday I was looking at Kalshi and Polymarket both. And Rory McIlroy at the time, like they'd finished 2 days and he was 6 strokes ahead, and he was like an 89% probability of winning the Masters. And I forget who was like a 6% chance or so forth. Well, right now he's a 38% probability of winning the Masters. Sam Burns is at 20, but there's another guy that's already tied for the lead, and I think he's going into the clubhouse. So that market may change again. And, if you can't forecast stock prices, you certainly can't forecast if somebody's going to shank a ball onto the side of the fairway and all of a sudden they got to hit through 3 trees and they take 6 strokes instead of 3 to, get it in the hole. And the bottom line is all of this stuff just encourages gambling constantly. And it's just not a good thing. It'll grind your net worth to a pulp. So as we start to get close to the end of the second hour, wanted to hit on a couple of things. This is just pure human interest, but it's things that we don't think about often, and it's what capitalism has brought us. As I go through this list, understand that the government didn't create any of these things. These were inventions created, in this case, by women whose inventions transformed household chores. They aren't famous, and they didn't necessarily get rich, but their products made domestic labor easier and safer. And so because of the incentive of capitalism and ownership and things like that, capitalists create, entrepreneurs create, and that creates wealth. So, first example, got to get to this. Margaret E. Knight. I'm guessing you've never heard of her, unless you happen to have a school teacher named Margaret Knight or something. But she created the flat-bottom paper bag machine. Now, we don't see those too much anymore. Everybody's got plastic. I think Whole Foods still has paper bags. But she started working in a textile mill at 12 years old, and she invented a safety device to stop the loom and prevent accidents. Then in her 20s, she was working at a paper bag factory in Springfield, Massachusetts. At the time, paper bags were envelope-shaped and couldn't stand upright, limiting their usefulness. In the 1860s, Knight designed a machine that cut, folded, and glued paper to form square-bottom bags, revolutionizing packaging for food and other goods, easing the chore of household shopping. Now, we kind of think of some of these things and like, well, yeah, everybody's got paper bags, but there was a time when everybody didn't have paper bags. And so they were probably doing parades in her honor, certainly the grocery stores, when she figured out how to do that machine, and people now could just put stuff in a flat bag and put it in the back of their station wagon and get it home. Josephine Cochran created the automatic dishwasher, or radically improved it in terms of what our current dishwashers are. Her father was a civil engineer who grew up around engineering drawings and tools, and she decided to try to create a new product that would solve a household problem. Her fine china often got chipped when hand-washed by servants. Let me touch on that a second. A lot of times, wealthy people kind of get a bad rap. Like they're just sitting around eating donuts or something like that, and they stole their money and they didn't work to create wealth to have that. And so here she is. She's probably doing pretty well if she has servants washing her fine china. And she just says, hey, I'm going to solve this problem. She's not just sitting around there griping about it. But dishwashing machines already existed, but they used scrubbers or brushes, required hand cranking, they cleaned poorly, and they broke dishes. Cochran's breakthrough was to use pressurized water, spraying hot water upward onto dishes, which were held in place by metal racks. And if you look in your kitchen today, that's very much what's going on in your dishwasher 150 years later. Florence Parpart improved the electric refrigerator. Before electric refrigeration, households relied on ice boxes, which required frequent deliveries of ice, etc. She was actually a stenographer and she designed and patented in 1914 an electric refrigerator that maintained consistent cold temperatures and so forth. And so there was another guy that had sort of created a improved ice box, but she ended up selling her patent to General Motors, and they started manufacturing those things in 1920. Alice Parker. Now, this is one of my favorites. Central heating furnace design. Home heating obviously used to be, logs and whatever, or they might have, fireplaces, coal burning, stoves, and so forth, but it required constant tending of the fire and ash and uneven heat distribution, all that kind of stuff. She designed the system that used natural gas as a heat source, employed a central furnace, and distributed warm air through ductwork to multiple rooms. It reduced fire hazards and constant manual labor. The interesting piece of this is she was an African-American woman living in New Jersey, and her invention was patented in 1919. Although it wasn't manufactured in her lifetime, it was a conceptual breakthrough. And so, there's a lot of things. All of those were Americans, by the way. Doesn't mean people in foreign countries don't invent things. But the point is, the government doesn't always make our life better. It's entrepreneurs and capitalism that make our life better. And as an investor, you can buy stock in those companies. And when people start using electric refrigerators or central heaters or, all that other stuff, dishwashers, you profit from that. That's what capitalism is all about.
Hey, just a note to you podcast folks, we just came out with a retirement income guide, and I'm super excited about this. There are all kinds of myths about taking income in retirement. People worry about running out of money, and rightfully so, because a lot of these myths can actually cause that. Now, the myths that you typically hear about, number one, dividends, living off dividends in retirement, real estate, life insurance as a retirement investment, and annuities, and interest-bearing accounts, and target date funds. There are all kinds of things out there. What I want to do is put something together that walks through why those things are problematic, number one. Number two, the other thing that I wanted to do is walk through the evidence-based research on taking income in retirement. And we got a ton of data going all the way back to 1900. Hey, what's the logic behind it? And it's intensely logical. So we put that together, and all you have to do to download that, making it super simple, just go to paulwinkler.com/relax, and you can actually get into that very easily right there. So I would urge you to do that. Check it out, because I think you're going to really like it. paulwinkler.com/relax.
Welcome back to the Investor Coaching Show. I'm Evan Barnard. Reminder, we got tons of content on our website, paulwinkler.com. And have some good news. This came from CBS News. I was doing some other research, but this was one of the better articles that supported this report that came out. The upper middle class is now the largest income group in the U.S., study finds. The U.S. middle class is shrinking, but not because more Americans are poorer. Instead, more households are climbing into the echelons of the upper middle class due to income gains in recent decades, according to research from the nonpartisan American Enterprise Institute. About 31% of U.S. households earn enough to be considered upper middle class, a roughly threefold increase since 1979, making it the nation's largest economic group, the research found. Meanwhile, the share of Americans in the core and low middle class segments has declined, primarily because more households in those income groups have jumped ahead economically. And so let's talk about that, because sometimes people say, well, the middle class is shrinking. Well, parts of the middle class are shrinking, but it's because they're getting wealthier. So in 1979, people considered poor or near poor were 29.7% of the population. In 2024, they were 18.7% of the population. I'll hone in on the middle, but at the top, rich, however you define rich, I think it was making more than $550,000 or something like that if you have a family of four. But in 1979, rich was 0.3% of the population. In 2024, it was 3.7%. Upper middle class in 1979 was 10.4%. And as we said earlier, upper middle class is now 31.1% of the population. Core middle class used to be 35%, and now it's 30%. Lower middle class used to be 24%, and now it's just under 16%. So, the phrase a lot of times you hear is a rising tide lifts all ships. And the bottom line is capitalism is actually thriving. And yes, there's still people that are poor. Yes, we still have poverty. All of that is still going to go on. And as I said, we're not perfect, but we're the best country on the planet. So the whole distribution of Americans from poor to rich has done better over time. And to that extent, and to the extent that fewer people are within a fixed income range, then it's going to happen that it's just going to take a little bit of time.
Hey, this is Paul Winkler. Hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Investor Coaching Show. If you want to learn more about what we do, go to our website, paulwinkler.com. Until next time, I'm Paul Winkler, reminding you that I believe that more educated investors are more confident investors, and confident investors are more successful investors. Have a great one. Advisory services offered through Paul Winkler Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced and information provided in this material are for general informational purposes only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what investments are appropriate for you, please consult with a financial advisor. Paul Winkler Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax or legal advisor regarding your particular situation.